So coming up next is someone also who has known Brad for a long time, and meaning no disrespect to anyone in the audience. I think this person arrived outdoors with the most elegant outfit on, and if you haven't seen him in his cape, catch him on the way out. That's Gene Murrow.
Thank you, David. I've known Brad for 45 years. We've prepared a few remarks about him. I'm looking for some that would be appropriate for a public gathering. Yes. I met Brad when I moved to California from Andover, Massachusetts, at the urging of Carol Langstaff, who said, "Gene, you're too uptight. You need some time in California." I arrived in LA and learned how to pronounce Sepulveda Boulevard and La Cuenca Boulevard. But the next thing I did was look up Mary Judson, who I had known at Pinewoods Camp for the 5 years or so, from 1965. Those of you who've never seen Mary Judson dance, there's just one or two, I think, videos. She was the most beautiful English country dancer I think I've ever seen. So to work with her was great. And I was told that the dancing was at the museum in Pasadena, this folk club that Ellen told us about. And it was wonderful. It was a small club devoted entirely to folk dancing. And there was this young, enthusiastic, beautiful dancer, a favorite of Mary's, often demoed with Mary, named Brad Foster. And we were just delighted that we had landed in a good place, even though we were way out west. And there was some sense at that time, for sure, that the influence of the Country Dance and Song Society ended at the Hudson River. And if you moved to California, you were really out of it, but we were delighted to work with Mary and to see Brad. We danced there for several years. We then moved to Harvard School, right? I was teaching at a prep school in LA, and I think the museum was closing down or having some difficulties. And I remember dancing, and Brad and I and Susan and Mary, we danced at the bank she worked at. That was interesting. Finally, we moved to Harvard School, right, and teaching. And then I stayed on, but Brad left and went up to Northern California. And we visited him a couple times, and he was doing architecture and building carpentry in a vineyard and doing all kinds of strange things. We thought he had just dissolved into the Northern California hippie flora and fauna. Until about 1980, 80 or 81, when Brad asked me to come out to teach at a new dance camp that he had organized at Mendocino. It was the Mendocino Woodlands Camp, deep in the heart of touchy-feely country. And so we got our visas, and we drove from Southern California up to Northern California. It was remarkable. He and Jenny had started this dance camp. And I was astounded that this young man, who I just knew as a great dancer and fun person to be with, and had gone off to do architecture and wine tasting or whatever he had done, had created this incredible camp. It was so well organized. It was just great. I had a great time, and I think I went back several times despite the great flu epidemic or whatever we had one year. But we went back many, many times after that. Anyway, after the first Mendocino, the next time I saw Brad was on the off-ramp of I-95 in Greenwich, Connecticut. I pulled up, and we were at a stoplight at the off-ramp, and I look over, and there's Brad. "What are you doing here?" And I kind of sensed that, in fact, something we had all hoped would happen, as David mentioned and Tom mentioned. After some leadership difficulties in the Country Dance Society, many of us lobbied to bring this brilliant organizer who had done the Mendocino camp to come east and to take over at the CDSS. And that was my first indication that you were going to do the gig, and that all of the shouting and whatnot had died down. And he told me that's indeed what he was going to do. So that was terrific. I'll do what Tom did and take a look at the notes. So I'd like to talk just very briefly. We can recount statistics and places and things that people have done, but what's important, I think, are the qualities that a person brings to a job and to a community like ours. And I think there are three qualities that Brad has that distinguish him and make him unique. The first is artistic ability. Here's somebody who is an accomplished and beautiful dancer of English dancing, contra, and I did see him do Balkan dancing, international dancing, and he's great at that. He's a brilliant teacher of English dancing and a brilliant teacher and leader of contra dancing. And a musician. I remember, I think it was 1975 when you turned up in my Pinewoods dance band class, awkwardly holding this accordion thing that you had just gotten, and did a brilliant job learning and playing music. And if I may quote Newt Tolman, the famous flute player from the Nelson, New Hampshire contra dance, Newt once said, I'm going to paraphrase, he said, I could play the Stars and Stripes from Murrow on a blade of grass between my thumbs, but I'll be damned if I could do a singing square. But Brad Foster can do singing squares. It's incredible. So I think there's no question that there's this core of real artistic accomplishment and talent. The second quality that I find in Brad is a quality. I've been a teacher for a long time. I actually have a degree in education, among other strange things. And the quality in teaching, I divide teachers into two types. There are the teachers who have this secret knowledge, and they give you the impression that they're sharing it with you bit by bit, and they're up here and you're down there, and you're so lucky to be getting these bits of information that they're spoon feeding or handing to you. And then there are teachers who have just a joyful love of the subject and are just delighted to share their enthusiasm and their love with that subject, with whoever's there. And I think Brad is in the second category. He has this wonderful, somebody talked about his impish grin, and I remember that at very appropriate moments. He's one of those teachers who just makes you say, wow, he loves this stuff, and I can do it too, and he can just bring you right along. So I think there's that quality. And the last quality he has is administrative ability that people have alluded to. And he has a quality of what the scholars call Sitzfleisch. He can sit still for a long time and work through a problem and get things organized. He has great vision, he has managerial ability, and an ability to kind of slow down and consider. And I have some specific examples of that. I would often come to him with really screwball ideas that I've developed over the years. And Brad, as a manager, knows how to say no without discouraging the person who's proposing something. I always admired that. There were a few ideas you said no to, and I'm glad you did. There are a couple he said yes to. One was I came up with the idea of doing a mini course at Pinewoods in conjunction with one of the weeks to train English dance teachers. And Brad thought that was a good idea. And working with Brad and with Steve, we developed this idea of the mini courses at Pinewoods. And it was, again, because of his managerial leadership and vision that happened. And the other thing was the Amherst Assembly. I'm also a recorder teacher, and I was teaching at the Amherst Early Music Festival for many years. And I thought one day it would be nice to do English dancing combined with the Amherst Early Music Festival. And I went to Brad and got Brad together with Val Horst, who was running that festival, and we did the first Amherst Assembly back in 1995. And that was a big success and made money for CDSS. Brad was very good with the finances. And Amherst made a few dollars as well. And that happened in 1995, and I let it go, as I often do. And Brad picked it up again and created the New London Assembly, which is a thriving English country dance program in conjunction with the Amherst Early Music Festival. So that's the kind of thing that he can do. He has the artistic ability, the chops, as we say in the music business. He's got the chops. He's got extraordinary teaching ability. And he's got vision and administrative ability. And for all of those, I thank you, and we all thank you.